Hi, storyteller. You don't need a Master's of Fine Arts degree in fiction to be a writer. Many really good writers indeed don't have one, and some really ineffective ones do. You no doubt already know this, but I just wanted to get it out of the way, just in case. So, getting an MFA is not a prerequisite for being a writer, but I did get one. And I work with a lot of writers who also got one, and with a lot more writers who didn't, who came to writing through less academic channels. And I've noticed a few differences between these groups of writers, not around writing skills themselves, but around the speed and efficiency of developing and honing writing skills. You see, most fiction MFAs will not teach you how to write fiction prescriptively or systematically. Like, yes, you'll probably learn the basics around structure, around characters needing goals and having conflict, and how to build and release tension and such things. But you're not going to be taught a 5-step formula to novel writing. Most MFAs back when I was getting mine over 15 years ago, and still today, are very dialectical in their nature, meaning you discuss your writing and also publish novels with your teachers and your fellow student writers. And there is a spectrum of agreement and disagreement in workshops. There rarely is one correct answer about what works and doesn't. And being in this environment for 3 years really seems to teach people with MFAs certain skills and lessons that I don't often find among folks who didn't go to grad school to study fiction writing. But I find those lessons quite valuable for all writers, whether you're a beginner or advanced. So I'm going to share them with you in this video. I'll start with number 5, which might be the least surprising to you, and I'll go to number 1, which is an approach I rarely see in writers without MFAs. Let's dig in. At number 5 is asking for specific feedback. If you're writing for an audience, getting feedback from that audience is invaluable when you're wanting to improve. But not all feedback is the same. I'm genuinely shocked how many writers I've met give their manuscripts to beta readers without any kind of instruction about what feedback they're looking for. That's a bit like asking someone, "How do I look?" and showing them your outfit without first telling them whether you're going out clubbing or going to a funeral. That context will significantly impact their feedback. Without giving your readers parameters about what feedback you are looking for, you might end up with grammar corrections on a first draft, or big picture suggestions on a near final draft, and you might have just wasted everyone's time to boot. So always tell your beta readers what feedback you're looking for. If this concept sounds good to you and you'd like to implement it, but genuinely are not sure what to ask for, I would suggest just these 3 directions for starters. Tell me where you get confused and which, if any, passages you've had to read multiple times in order to understand them. Tell me honestly where you got bored and would have perhaps stopped reading. And if any elements or passages stand out to you that you found extra exciting and interesting, please point them out. If you start with these 3, you'll soon begin learning what additional input would be useful for you and also what you might not need in additional feedback. Also, unless you are in the end stages of revision and need to focus on one very particular thing, try not to be too leading with your beta readers. If you're suspecting that your climax is weak, for example, don't lead with that. Ask the 3 things just discussed, and if your climax gets flagged as boring or confusing, you have your answer. If it doesn't, then feel free to ask follow-up questions once you get the feedback, so you can better understand how your climax comes across. But either way, always give your beta readers parameters about what kind of feedback you're looking for. And I find this is especially important if you're giving your manuscript to friends and family. Number 4 also concerns feedback, but this time it's you giving feedback and reading others' work in progress. There are few things more educational than seeing others' early drafts or work in progress. For one, it demystifies writing, and you soon realize that even strong writers don't hit the bullseye from the get-go, and you'll get used to seeing just how much can change in revision. But additionally, it trains your editing skills, including the language around writing, and how you identify and articulate what works and doesn't work in ways that can be actionable for someone else. Now, I am aware that this is genuinely a luxury of an MFA or even an undergrad writing program, where you just have access to a lot of people with work in progress who want your feedback on it. If you're not in such a setting, you can try to find a writing group or community that meets your needs, which I know is easier said than done. If you are struggling to get your hands on someone's early drafts or work in progress, but you really would like to, you can sign up for my newsletter. I don't send it out very often, but when I do, I try to include an old draft of a piece precisely so that writers can be exposed to others' work in progress. I also annotate those drafts with what kinds of things I would flag and also what kind of suggestions I would give for improvement. In this way, you can do your own review and analysis and compare your notes to mine. It's not a great replacement for having a community, but if you want to test your editing muscles, I hope it proves to be a useful exercise. I will leave the newsletter sign-up link below. For number 3, we're still sort of in the realm of feedback, but specifically learning which feedback to ignore. The days of my MFA were a delight of getting 8 to 12 beta readers on my work in one go. Some professors ran the workshops with enough curation that this would be very helpful. Some didn't. Some of my peers were, like myself, in the pedagogy track of our program, so we were trained in peer review, and getting feedback from those peers was very helpful. And of course, sometimes a person just gets you and your work, and their input is amazing. Most others were mediocre. And all this means I got really good at knowing what feedback to ignore and what feedback to take. If you've never gotten this volume of feedback, here are my 3 suggestions to follow as a rule of thumb. Don't take feedback from someone who is not your audience at all. If you are writing romantasy and your beta reader hates romantasy, you can probably skip most of their input. The good news is that if you're not in a class setting, you get to curate your beta readers anyway, so just don't give your work to someone who's not your audience. This, by the way, goes for alpha readers as well. Alpha readers are professionals like me, so editors, professors, coaches. And it can be tempting to think that just because someone is really good at something and you're even paying them money, that their advice is good. But you have to make sure you're the right match. Like, if you want to casually get in shape and you have 3 hours a week for that, you're not going to go to a coach who's giving you a 20 hours a week workout routine. And it doesn't matter how many gold medalists that they have trained, you're just not the right fit for each other. The good news is that the vast majority of writing professionals, worth their salt, are very transparent about what kinds of clients they can help and can't. But the bottom line is, don't take feedback from someone who doesn't enjoy reading the category of work that you are writing. And rule of thumb number 2 is ignore all suggestions for how to fix what's not working in your story. Many beta readers will often, well-meaningly, give you advice on how to improve one specific thing that they perceive as not working. They'll say things like, add more interiority, for example. But beta readers are pretty good at pointing out when something is not working, but they're usually pretty bad at figuring out how to fix it. And that's okay, because that part is not their job. That part is your job. And if you give your readers effective feedback parameters, you're unlikely to get those suggestions. But if you happen to get them anyway, learn to read between the lines here. So if you're getting a comment like, add more interiority, it usually means that the reader doesn't understand the character's motivations or that they don't feel they're connecting to the character. Take that as the signal and put your efforts into figuring out which one it is and improving it. This can still apply to alpha reader feedback as well, by the way. Yes, it is more often an editor's job to tell you what to fix and how to fix it, but you are still the master of your story. I've ignored many professors' prescriptive feedback just for them to then tell me that what I did end up doing actually works. My final suggestion is to ignore outlier feedback. If you happen to get comments from 5 beta readers and only one of them really hated a thing or really loved a thing, chances are you can ignore that. Listen to your gut and any relevant factors, but in general, there's a stronger signal in consensus than in outliers among beta readers. At number 2, I have the lesson I call Don't Just Work on Your Magnum Opus. Students in an MFA setting have to deliver a novel or a short story collection for their final thesis, and this can often be their one big masterpiece, the project of their heart. But we also take a bunch of classes that are not related to our main project, and that is where the meat of improving our craft and honing our skills really happens. I'm no poet, but I have written many poems, and that has really given me a huge range when it comes to tone and sentences. I've written short stories on deadline, short shorts, personal essays, and I've gotten used to just doing writing exercises. There are 3 primary benefits of doing creative writing that are not working on your primary project. One is training your creativity. I have a notebook where I jot down a cool image, phrase, dialogue snippet, or story idea every day. Some days it's easy because our local hawk chased a pigeon almost into our living room window, and I looked up just in time to witness 2 pairs of wings spread, followed by feathers floating into a spray of blood on the ground. And other times I have to dig and do a bit more work, but both train my creativity. Am I going to put these into a story later on? Not necessarily. I treat this as practice, just like a sketchbook. If you ask any visual artist about their sketchbook, they will tell you that the vast majority of sketches in it are not something that they are ever planning to turn into a full composition. The point is the sketching. The second benefit of not just working on your primary project is avoiding perfectionist tendencies. When we have just one big idea, one sprawling project, one very long-term goal, it can sometimes become too precious for its own and for our own good. We can tie our identity into it and are afraid of messing it up. If you have multiple smaller scale projects, you both get the satisfaction of finishing something, even if it's something as small as jotting down a sentence, and you remind yourself that the big project is not the only thing there is. Now, if you are a true perfectionist, this will not cure you, but it can still help. I recommend one exercise that I used to do in grad school and a while after that. And the exercise goes like this. Pick 1 week each month and pick 3 to 5 days that week where you will write one short story on those days. The key is to set a 45-minute timer. If you finish the short in that time, great. If you don't, you can stop writing after 45 minutes anyway. If your creative well is running really dry on those days, one thing that I used to do with friends is pick up a random poetry book, open it to a page and randomly point to a line, and then incorporate that line into the story. It does wonders for jumpstarting creativity. If you don't have books of poems, check out the website poems.com. They have a Poetry Daily subscription where they'll send you 1 poem a day for free. I have no affiliation with them, but I love that service. Anyway, the point of this exercise is to just write and overcome your inner critic and your perfectionist tendencies. At worst, you will have trained your writing muscles. At best, you might end up with a draft that you actually want to work on and want to finish. And the final benefit of not working just on your one big masterpiece is doing exercises to actually improve your skills. Now, this one is more intentionally analytical than the previous 2, and it does benefit from having instruction or a trained peer. But even if you don't have an editor, teacher, or effective writing buddy to give you feedback, here's how you can approach it solo. Step 1. Identify a writing skill that you'd like to acquire or improve at. Let's say you want to write more effective subtext. Step 2. Find instances of effective subtext in stories that you admire, ideally more than one instance. I tend to aim for 2 to 3. As an extra bonus, try to stick with the medium that you're writing, so if you're working on short stories, find an example in a short story. What's less optional is to really try to avoid movies or visual mediums. These are a separate skill set from writing prose. Step 3, analyze how your samples achieve the technique that you're practicing. What exactly are they doing? How much exposition is present? What is left out? Does it rely on a previous setup? Step 4, write a passage of your own where the topic at hand is different from your source material, but the character dynamics are similar. Step 5, let the exercise sit for 3 days and then reread it and try to evaluate if you've achieved the desired effect. If you have, great. If you haven't, go back to the analysis. None of these are a silver bullet, but they can certainly help you keep expanding your creative muscles, your skills, and avoid a perfectionist mindset as much as possible. I have one more lesson, but if you feel I'm leaving out some good ones, let me know in the comments. And if you're finding value in this, hit the like button. At number 1, I have check the writing advice. Perhaps the biggest benefit of my MFA is that it taught me how to learn how to write. I mentioned it wasn't a very prescriptive environment as a whole. Some individual professors would suggest certain pieces of advice, but an hour later, you'd be in a class with a professor who would recommend the opposite of that. So in aggregate, it was easy to see the uses and limits of any prescriptive advice. Like, we understood that there were maybe not infinite ways to write a thing, but there were legitimately a dozen or so ways. But what I quickly realized when I began working with writers without MFAs is that some would follow one specific craft book or one specific piece of advice, like it's a holy commandment, and feel like they themselves are the problem, like they just need to work harder to make it work for them. I'm not saying that authors or writing advice books or book coaches on the internet, myself included, are maliciously giving bad advice. At least the vast majority of us is not. But we're human. Humans don't know everything perfectly and explain it perfectly for everyone. And believe it or not, some people are really good at sounding super confident, but they don't know what they're talking about. Recently, I came across some writing advice that, kindly put, simply is not consistent with reality, but it is being confidently touted. And some beginning writers will unfortunately believe it. So, as a rule of thumb, don't get all your writing knowledge from one person, myself included. But more importantly than that, check any advice before you follow it. There are fields of knowledge where you require specialized equipment to figure out if something is true. I will tell you right now that I am extremely unlikely to buy some antibodies and microscope and go check if my blood type really is what my doctor says it is. I will just trust my doctor. But you don't have to just trust your writing coach or writing group or craft book or editor. All you need to check their proclamations is be literate and have access to books. And I know these aren't universal, but chances are high that if you're watching this, you are literate and you have at least access to a public library. So next time someone swears to you that you should do show don't tell this way and not that way, or start your book in this specific way, grab 3 to 12 books. If you've only got time for 3, make sure that those 3 are in your specific genre, have stood the test of time, or have very positive critical and popular reviews. If you have time for 12, get a range in there. Look outside your genre and also at books that are mediocre. And then just find in them the stuff that you're checking and read what they do. Do they use show don't tell in that way? Do they start in that certain way? Do they use dialogue tags in a certain way? I know it's tempting to feel like you've stumbled onto the one silver bullet or have the one method that will absolutely work. And a lot of marketing goes into making you believe that rhetoric. But the reason I'm pretty adamant about checking advice first is because it sucks to have to scrap everything, and it sucks to develop really bad habits and have to unlearn stuff. I have worked with writers who have invested months and sometimes years into telling their stories following one specific type of advice, and they had to completely start over. When I take on coaching clients, I don't just offer manuscript analysis, but will also do some skill development where it's relevant. This is a message that I got from a client a while ago.
I've always gotten the advice that you should start a story with the day in the life of your protagonist's status quo. As you suggested, I'm thinking back over really impactful stories and realizing how little it applies to most of them. It's blowing my mind.
So I hope you'll be able to blow your own mind with a little bit of double checking. And if you would like to get some writing advice that is transparent about its uses and limits, you can check out either of these 2 videos. My name is Tina. I'm a writer, writing coach, and recovering academic. Until next time, write on.